My name is Dan Bossie, President of Ag Resource Company, joined by Dr. Bill Tierney, our Director of Research here at Ag Resource, just going over a little bit of what the October crop report told us today. Now, the October crop report is the most important of the season as it incorporates Farm Service Agency data on harvested and planted acreage. Also, of course, it gives us the first actual test plot data from NASS. And so we would look at this report as being a good barometer of where the crop is. Bill, as we think about corn and soybean production here today, corn production second largest on record, same for beans. Any comments that you would have coming from this report?
Well, most people focus on the NASS production numbers, and they always have two components. In this case, yield was higher than the trade had expected, but harvested area was lower. Now, the trade had expected the area was going to be lower because of the dramatic 1.4 million acre cut that USDA did in the small grains report. So people thought the FSA data that came out in September was probably going to mean that there was going to be further acreage reductions. And they were correct, but it was larger than expected. That was compensated somewhat by a higher than expected yield. On the other hand, USDA made no changes at all in the demand projections. Everything was just the same as it was before, so that resulted in virtually almost no change in ending stocks from the September crop report.
I think it's something remarkable when I think about it. We go back to June, at least in this shop, looking at all the flooding and all the problems that we had with weather. June being one of the wettest months on record for the Midwest, or at least the eastern and south central part of the Midwest. And yet we still ended up with a corn yield of 168 and a bean yield that potentially could still be record large. We're only 0.3 of a bushel away from that. To me, if we had normal weather and we start looking at corn yield models on weather, we could have even had a larger crop than what we saw today.
I agree. If you take a look at crop conditions alone suggest yields could be higher. The crop condition model suggests 169, even 170 bushels. If you hadn't had the deterioration in crop yields, crop conditions that were caused by the unfavorable weather in June, if we had the kind of weather we had last year, probably mid-170s was possible. You've often stated that you thought that genetics is responsible for the better than expected yields that we saw last year and again this year. That may be true. I'd like to see one more year. You know, we've seen a good growing season last year, not so good this year. I'd like to see an average growing season next year. And then I'd be willing to buy into the argument that something's going on with genetics that's boosted yields up above that trend expectation.
All I can say today is if you look at the scatters of soybean pod weights, and you look at 12, 13, 14 in this year, they are much above the trend that we've seen before. And you really wonder if Roundup Ready 2 and the insertion of new genetic material is helping the bean crop. But like you said, we need one more year maybe to confirm that.
That could be. On the other hand, September was extremely favorable for growing conditions for soybeans. And I'm not a crop agronomist. I've never raised a crop of soybeans. But people tell me over and over again, it's weather in September. If you get good filling weather, you can really add yield. So here again, I'd like to see maybe 3 years of so you can say overall average conditions. And if let's say next year we get something like a 48 bushel yield, then I'd be willing to buy into the argument that genetics has made a difference this year.
Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit here about the markets. We had a mixed reaction in Chicago today. Mm-hmm. Grains going lower, soybeans going higher. I think accordingly to what stock levels were, soybean stocks being cut from 450 to 425, corn and wheat stocks down or not much change. I guess as we stand back from it, the report today really didn't jolt the markets into any new ranges. What do you think is going to happen going forward?
Well, unless you're dealing with a short crop year, generally you expect to see the lows in prices at harvest time, and we're still have a lot of harvest to go, a whole lot to go in the case of corn. I was seeing some commentary this week that some locations, particularly in the Western Corn Belt, have pretty much maxed out their capacity to take new soybeans. So we may see a cash-driven pressured market with basis weakening sharply as farmers find it difficult to find a home for soybeans. So maybe we're going to push this market lower simply on weakening basis, particularly for soybeans.
Cash supplies.
Yeah.
As we think about the other component now, the market's looking forward, it's all about demand, I guess. And we think about export and maybe crush or export and ethanol in terms of corn. Those trends aren't too robust here today. What do you think about the demand trends going forward?
Well, I think the USDA correctly lowered their soybean export estimate. They left it unchanged in September. They lowered it in the August WASDE. I think they're beginning to pay more attention to pace analysis, which looks at the pace of U.S. export sales. And they're also watching very closely the vessel lineup in South America. So based on our analysis of pace analysis as well as ship lineups, we think there's possibly another 75 to 100 million bushels lower that they could easily go. They're probably not going to do that all in one bite. We may see a further cut in November and a further cut in December for soybeans. In the case of corn, unfortunately, pace analysis really doesn't have reliability until you get out to, let's say, January. I think if in January export sales still aren't up at the pace needed, I think we'll see some cuts in the corn export number as well.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Dan Bossie, President of Ag Resource, joined by Dr. Bill Tierney. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back again.